if I publish a photo of a Marine who's crying as he's holding his best friend's dog tags, at his memorial service, guess what that little savage is gonna do once he's done? He's gonna wipe his cheeks and he's gonna continue to kick butt and take it to the enemy, right? He's not gonna stop doing his job just because he cried over his best friend. And I always felt
Hello, this is Tab Bartley, and you are listening to the Oath We Took podcast, the show that tells the Marine Corps story through the Marines that served. I'm joined today by Chris Zahn. He is the reason for this podcast. I know so many amazing Marines who hesitate to tell their stories. Their stories hold so much power and so many life lessons. Oftentimes, though, they go untold. Not every Marine's story is the same. What is the same is the oath that we all took. So before I start asking questions, I have to tell, I'm going to say probably my favorite story of Sergeant Zahn for me. And then I think as we get through the podcast and you hear his personality, I think it'll stand out even more. But I was I think I was a PFC or Lance Corporal. Either way, I was a super junior Marine.
yeah.
And at that time, we were working in a different building with all the command staff because our building had a bunch of black mold and issues.
Mhm.
And let me preface this by saying I'm from the Midwest. I am used to tornadoes. However, I'm not used to earthquakes. And the first earthquake I ever experienced was in the Marine Corps at Marine Corps Base Quantico, not on the West Coast. And as the building starts to shake, I remember Sergeant Zahn, who's normally super calm, super jolly, super happy person, just look at me and just get down with this most dad face, I will protect you, I will save you, I have ever seen. And I to this day think of that moment so often, and I think that it just portrays who we're talking about today. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining me on my podcast.
Absolutely. Glad to be here. Glad that you're doing this. I mean, I think it's something that we talked about early on when you first started this podcast. And I'm so glad that you're going and executing and rocking with it. I've loved all the Marines that you've talked to so far. And I hope that my story also, is something that people reflect on and they enjoy. And I can't wait to get into it.
I am sure they will. And the first question we always start with was, why did you decide to join the Marine Corps?
I'm going to answer that one, but first I do want to talk about the earthquake, because I am also from the Midwest. So it was also my first earthquake experience, and I didn't know what was going on either. I think what helped me out a lot in that moment was that I had someone to take care of besides myself, right? So my protective instinct was take care of, Bartley first, and then whatever happens is what happens. But it allowed me to focus on something, because otherwise, I don't know, I may have frozen up, I may have not known what to do, I may have been and been all crazy. Luckily, it was nothing. I think a couple of lawn chairs got knocked over, but it was a fun experience. Now I can say I've done it. Um, Going back for me, I was always that kid that was going to join the military as soon as I got done with high school. I was literally going to the recruiting station my freshman year and going to pool D functions. And I always knew it was going to be the Marines, because for me, I knew I wanted to challenge myself. I knew I wanted the test of, can I meet this standard, right? And I bought into the Kool-Aid. We have the toughest standard, right? So for me, it was very simple to turn down the other services and say, I want to be a Marine because that's the hardest barrier to entry. That's the hardest boot camp. That's the most, iconic branch for that reason. It's hard to be a Marine. And I wanted that challenge fresh out of high school just to see if I could do it. Because at the time, you're 18, 19 years old and you haven't really had what you think of as hard challenges in your life. Now, obviously, as an adult, looking back at my childhood now, there's a lot of challenges. But at that point, it was I wanted to know what kind of man I was going to be, and I knew the Marine Corps would at least show me that.
And did you pick your MOS of public affairs when you went in?
Not really, because the whole concept of getting to pick your job was not something I really thought of. I just was like, I want to be a Marine. I'll be an open contract. When I took the ASVAB, I was actually one of the top performers in the state for my score, especially for my school district. So I could have gotten any job I wanted, essentially. I didn't know that, so I was misreading the ASVAB score and the GT score. And I'm looking at it like, wait, I thought you guys told me I tested good. I'm looking at these things that I'm qualified for, and it's like I can be motor T or infantry. No disrespect to them, but the GT score for entry is low. And then my recruiter was like, no, 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 that's your ASVAB score, not your GT score. Your GT score is this. You're qualified for everything. I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, aren't you in some video program at school? You should be public affairs. What the heck is public affairs? And he really sold me on it. And I'll never forget because his sales speech essentially was probably one of the truest things a recruiter has ever said. You're going to see every job in the Marine Corps. You're going to take pictures of it. You're going to get to do all the things that they do, and then you'll get to go home to your barracks room. And by and large, that's my Marine Corps experience in the public affairs field. I got to do all the Marine Corps things and then still go back to my barracks room sometimes. Sometimes, not all the times.
Sometimes. And you deployed pretty young in your career, correct?
Mhm.
As public affairs. Can you kind of explain what that experience is deploying as public affairs, kind of compared to some other, MOSs and other like how people, I guess, perceive that to be?
Yeah. For me, I had no thought about deploying, even though I enlisted in 2004, hit the fleet in early 2005. So there was very much multiple wars going on. Pretty much everyone was deploying, but I got my first unit out of MOS school was 4th Marine Anti-Terrorism Brigade, which later became MARSOC. At the time, it was a non-deployable unit for the headquarters staff. Now they would have trainers that would go to different countries and train foreign nationals on infantry skills and marksmanship and stuff like that. But at the time, it was just me and a gunny in the office, and he was halfway out the door to retirement essentially. So PFC Zahn would show up at the office at 8 a.m. He'd show up at 11 in civvies and tell me to go to lunch. I'd go to lunch for 2.5 hours. I'd come back. He'd still be sitting there in civvies checking emails, and then we're like, all right, well, I'm going to go to rehab. Rehab meaning the golf course or the staff NCO club. And that was my day for the first like 4 months I was in the fleet. So I thought the Marine Corps was great. I thought it was stupid cake. I thought everybody like in boot camp was lying about how hard this stuff was. I was like, I get a 2 hour lunch. I get to go play basketball. Like my gunny, he's cool as hell. He tells me to call him Scott. Like it's awesome. And then one day he comes into the office, he's like, hey, you're going to Iraq with a Victor unit. What is a Victor unit? Iraq, okay, fine, but like what's a Victor unit? And then he told me you're going with the infantry in like a month and a half. so figure it out. Oh, by the way, you're going to CAX in 2 weeks, which so you're going to 29 Palms for a month of field training with the unit. So I literally like on a random Tuesday, I found out I was going to Iraq with a unit that I'd never interacted with before, and was very brand new to the fleet. I think I wrote one news story the entire time from MOS school until deployment. So yeah, it was very fun because I was very looking back at it now, like I thought I was prepared. I was very unprepared. Not even just in terms of like the experience of what Iraq would be like, but in terms of how to actually do my job. I was very green. I didn't know anything but the basics of how to shoot photos on automatic and write simple news stories. Um, and it showed. It really did.
And we have a great schoolhouse that we go to. Public Affairs goes to the Defense Information School. Like they are known internationally for what they do. But you can't get real world experience. That's what you're supposed to get, right? When you go into the fleet and you're supposed to have this mentorship, which was something we'll talk later on that you were so good at with doing with Marines. And it's because you didn't have that. So then not only did you have to learn your job, but you had to learn how to be part of a unit in a month that you hadn't had any interaction with any of these Marines, right?
And I was
And you're
still a
a young
PFC.
man. And
I
you're
was a
yeah, you're a
PFC.
pussy. But
you know,
PFC, best of luck.
yeah. And I mean, I figured it out because that's what we do. I was lucky that I did have some people who were able to help show me the way. There was a couple different combat camera guys that were already in country because they deployed with the regiment and not the battalion. So like when we got there, they had already been there for a few months. One of them is actually soon to retire, Captain, or yeah, I believe he's still Captain. Atterbury, Atterbury, great guy, awesome dude. He's a pilot now because who sticks around, right? In our field. And the adjutant at the time was a former public affairs Marine as well, former combat correspondent as well. Wasn't very helpful, but he was at least helpful in terms of, editing my copy and stuff like that. So I did have some, but for the most part, it was a lot of figure it out. Here's what the expectations are. Oh, and by the way, you're also going to be like a Marine as well on patrol in Fallujah with the infantry for 7 months. So get ready for that.
So what were some of the, we'll talk about some of the, I think talking first about what were some of the public affairs, like doing your job challenges, and then what were some of those like Marine and just being in Fallujah challenges?
The biggest public affairs challenges I struggled with early on were gear related. I didn't know how to set up my gear properly. I didn't have an idea of what I should carry with me on patrols. It took me some time to kind of figure that out and buy some aftermarket items that made me carrying my camera and then the rest of my combat load a little bit easier because a lot of times the basic stuff we were getting issued at that time, especially in 2005, it wasn't great compared to some of the aftermarket off the shelf stuff you could buy at like the PX or even Amazon at the time. I would get Amazon stuff shipped to me in 2005. It took 2 weeks, not 2 days, Bezos, but hey, you figured it out. Um, so yeah, once I kind of found the rhythm of setting my gear up properly, especially so I didn't stick out like a sore thumb on patrol. It was very obvious some of those first movements I did, even in 29 Palms when we were just, practicing essentially, that I was the brand new boot fresh out of, the schoolhouse, running around like a chicken with his head cut off and didn't know how to do like, contact drills and stuff like that, or what happens if an IED goes off. So luckily, the training got better over the years, right? That's something that, as you alluded to, I made a point of myself over my career to say that anyone who's going is going to get everything I can give them to know what they're facing ahead of time. Um, but yeah, and then the daily adventures of the life where you're brand new to a unit. You're obviously a very young Marine, and you're getting, at the time, the battalion I was with, Second Battalion, Six Marines, 2-6. They had been on a previous deployment together, the majority of the battalion, so they were tight. They were seasoned. The vast majority of the guys were already combat veterans from at least one deployment, and they were very close knit groups because these are squads and platoons that have been together for 2-3 years at that point, sleeping together in the same huts, sleeping under the same rocks together. And it's hard to break that circle of trust sometimes, especially as the new guy, especially when you want to talk about them publicly in a way that a lot of guys weren't willing to really willing to be talked about.
And that's a challenge. I think it doesn't matter where you are, almost like public affairs wise, that you're constantly like, that's constantly a challenge of like Marines don't want to tell their stories. They don't feel comfortable, or they've told it before and it's been skewed a different way, or there's so many factors that go into that. And it's a challenge that, again, I don't think it ever just like goes away. I don't think there was ever a unit that was just like, yeah, PAO, come on in and do whatever you want. Like, have fun. But you also, in that time, you had a lot of challenges just in general of being a Marine on a deployment. And it's something that, when you were our sergeant and leading us, it was something that you were very like vocal about. And for me, it had a huge impact of how willing you were to share like the emotions behind it and the things that you went through. So can you tell me a little bit about those experiences?
Yeah, I mean, you can never prepare someone fully for combat. You know, you can rehearse, you can practice, you can um, brainwash to a certain degree. There's levels that you can get humans ready for it, but you never know how you're going to react until the first time you're under fire or the first time you get blown up or the first time you see a dead body, right? these aren't small experiences in anyone's lifetime. Um, and it sucks. And it hurts you in ways that you're not really ready to deal with yet because you're still just focused on the mission and going forward. Um, some of the first casualties that we took, I didn't know what a memorial service was, you know. So we lost one gentleman early on in our deployment, and I didn't know that at a memorial service, the guys that were with them, they stand up and they give these beautiful speeches about, the guy that they just served behind who's no longer here. And a lot of them are very heartfelt, and a lot of them are very painful to hear, especially when you're talking about, he's got two young kids at home and we used to play together on Friday nights, and these are tough moments. And I knew early on that I wanted to share as much of those moments with the people back home as I could. It felt like something I needed to do for myself, like a solemn responsibility. Um, but also I wanted them to know that, like, when you lose your service member overseas, whether it's your, son, father, husband, whatever, like, we feel that. It's not something that just happens on a casualty sheet. We feel it over there. We feel it right next to them. And then we have to go back and keep doing our job as well. We don't really get time to think about it. You get the service, and the service is meant to be your, cathartic break. And then you put it behind, a barrier in your mind, and you have to turn it off and stop thinking about it and keep focusing on the mission. Um, but I wanted to share those, and I've spoken about this tough, or before. One of my toughest moments is the memorial story that, like, I wanted to write and I couldn't. I don't feel like I ever did it the diligence I thought it deserved, right? To tell these specific guy's story. And I've talked about it publicly at length now, but man, at the time, that was a big turning point for me. And it really motivated a lot of my career because I felt like I failed my fellow Marines, and I vowed to never do that again.
And I know that like we had talked about before, we'd had this conversation that even in that moment too, it's like you in your position, you're battling this, like doing it justice, but you've also gone through it, right? Like you're trying to produce something that helps other people heal. And it almost is like a guilt or like that you can't have feelings in that moment, right? Like, because that's something we've talked about a lot, that like when you were personally like repressing stuff or not, it was because of that. Like you felt like you couldn't, like you almost like didn't have a right to have those
Marines don't
emotions.
cry. Yeah,
And
Marines
so
don't cry.
how did that impact you, and how did you like come to the conclusion of like, no, I have the right to feel all of these things? And like, what was some of like that impact in that journey?
It always felt like a silly concept to me, this whole idea that, like, Marines can't show emotion or we can't be human. And I get it. There's a time and a place for that, for everything, right? But in my mind, it doesn't make us look weaker that we have emotions than that we feel. I mean, if I publish a photo of a Marine who's crying as he's holding his best friend's dog tags, at his memorial service, guess what that little savage is gonna do once he's done? He's gonna wipe his cheeks, and he's gonna continue to kick butt, and take it to the enemy, right? He's not gonna stop doing his job just because he cried over his best friend. And I always felt like that was something that we should show. Is like, we're humans and we'll still mess you up, okay? We're still the finest fighting force in the world, and we have human emotions as well. I hated this idea that I learned early in my career, that I had to be this emotionless automaton, because I always look back at the leaders that I, was most attracted to in my life, and the ones I felt most connected to were the ones who showed me they were a human being, as well as someone who cared about me while they were putting a foot up my butt. Like, I can take discipline, I can take getting yelled at, but you got to show me that you're a human being who cares about me first, and then I'll go to war for you. So I always wanted to do that for my people when I was ever put in charge of someone. Very early on, I just wanted everyone to know, like, I will care about you, and I will motivate you, but you're gonna always know I care about you first.
Which was something last time when we had talked about this, that, I didn't know that the sergeant Zahn I got showed his emotion, showed weaknesses, showed that like his life wasn't perfect. And I'm gonna get emotional now saying this, but like me as a person, I don't share a lot of things, right? Like especially in the Marine Corps. And so I can't thank you enough for the leader that you were, because we had so many conversations that if you hadn't led the way you did, that we wouldn't have. And I don't know where some of my choices as a junior Marine would have been, because I felt safe that I could have these conversations with you, because you showed me things about yourself and things about like leading. And when we had talked last time and I had brought that up, you had said that like that wasn't even the sergeant's on I got wasn't the sergeant's on that other people had gotten. And it just even still it like blows my mind, because like that was like, I mean that's, like the sergeant's on I know. So can you tell me about that journey and how like initially you were leading and then how you evolved to the sergeant's on I knew, who showed his emotions, showed who he was, and showed his Marines he cared.
Yeah, definitely. Um, I thank you for bringing that up, because I remember that being something we've talked about before. Because Sergeant Zahn was very much, as you're describing, heart on my sleeve, caring. I was reluctant to yell at people unless I had to. I'd always give you guys tons of leeway, even when would get yelled at, because I was giving you leeway. Um, and all of that came about because Corporal Zahn was a jerk. Corporal Zahn was that guy who was always yelling and screaming, and we'll stay in the office till 3 o'clock in the morning. I don't care. Mission accomplishment, mission accomplishment, mission accomplishment. And I didn't show as much of myself because I was in different periods of my life. And I was also dealing with different personal issues at that time. And I look back at it now, and I am so glad that I was totally different person for you guys than I was for some of like if I'd have brought that energy I had in Beaufort and brought it up to Quantico, I could have really messed a lot of careers up. If I could have really hurt some people in ways that I would have never thought about. But someone like you and someone like Jefferson, were two examples of people that if I had been hostile and angry and yelling at you guys the way I used to yell at uh freaking Petway and Clark back in the day, right? If I yelled at you guys like that, you would have been different people. It could have changed your whole life. It may not have. Jefferson may have just like slapped me one day and it would have been a thing. You never know. But
An open brawl just in the middle of
for,
the press pit.
for anyone who knows Jefferson, you would know it's not out of the it's not completely unlikely, but like he wouldn't really do it. He wouldn't hurt a fly. He's such a good guy. But I'm glad that I was at a different place in my life and I was able to be a different leader and I was able to grow because I didn't always like yelling at people. I didn't always like being the disciplinarian and the heavy hand of discipline. And I really was just in a place in my life where I was angry a lot. I was dealing with a lot of personal issues. I was dealing with PTSD and depression from two consecutive deployments that I was refusing to go and get diagnosed and treated for. I refused a lot of help and I walked around angry a lot and I took it out on people. And yeah, the mission got accomplished. And yeah, I got a lot of really cool things done. And yeah, if you look back at those Marines and ask them questions, they will probably feel the same way about me that you guys do, right? Because there are still always these moments where I'm going to be me, and show people how I care about them. But yeah, I was a bit of a jerk, not a bit. I was a lot of a jerk. And then when I came to Quantico, I was in the middle of getting divorced. I didn't know anybody there at that duty station. I didn't have any friends like off base or I made people, but like I needed you guys. I needed you guys because I was in the barracks with y'all, and it was the first time where I was like, I know I'm a sergeant, you guys are POCs and lance corporals, and we shouldn't be hanging out at all, but like you guys were such an awesome crew and you were so close knit from day one that I was like, I wanted to be a part of that. Well, how do you be a part of that? Okay, you don't be a jerk to them.
You go
Well,
bowling, you go to dinner, you do these, like, I will say, like, I hear it a lot, like, don't let like work say that like you're a family, but we were legitimately like a
well,
family.
it wasn't just
We
me either. It was Willis and Moses and Duncan
yeah.
who were the NCOs at the time, even the officers, even Matt Sergeant Cardella. Like everyone bonded like a family, regardless of rank. And rank was absolutely still a thing
Oh
between
yeah.
us. But like, yeah, I loved the camaraderie we had in that office, and it helped me find find the kind of leader, the balance of like who I want to be in my life, right? And I've been the guy that you guys got at Quantico is pretty much the guy I've been the rest of my life ever since. I
And I
I
was
love
gonna
it.
say that too. I feel like super elevated, right? Like as you grow, like you see that.
Yeah,
But that's why I think it was so shocking before when you were like, that's not how I was. And I was like, you were an asshole? How? Like, see
yeah.
it.
Oh, and I love it now when I meet people and they're like, "Oh, wait, you were a Marine? I couldn't imagine that." And I'm like, "Well, thanks."
uh
I'm not bothered by that because like it means you're underestimating me, and I'll mess you up if I need to, but like it means you don't see me as that kind of like person I used to be.
and hello, listeners. The Oath We Took podcast can now be heard on Wreaths Across America Radio. Download the iHeartRadio app and tune in to Wreaths Across America radio station every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. As always, I challenge you to not think a Marine, but listen to their stories instead. And how was that transition out of the Marine Corps for you?
For me, it was really rough. And I had a different transition than most people. I remember writing something about this a few years, yeah, like what, probably a decade ago, when I first got out, because I realized that most people, when they get out, they either like go home or they stay in the area of their last duty station or somewhere they've been stationed before where they had ties, or if they married and they've settled down with a family somewhere, they go maybe to like where their spouse is from. They normally go to where they already have ties. And I didn't. I got out and I went to Missouri, and I went to college in St. Louis because I'd gotten divorced and that's where my kids lived. And at the time, I wanted to be as present as I could in their lives, and I wanted to, go to school on a GI Bill and all that. But what it meant was that when I left the community, like I really left the community. All of a sudden, one day I was just on my own in a city where I knew nobody. And it was the first time where everything was kind of hitting me as far as like, oh, you really do have some issues with PTSD, and you do have some issues with depression related to the things that you experience while you're deployed. And you're not a Marine anymore. Like you're not wearing the uniform anymore every day. So like that stuff started to eat me up, and it started to get really ugly for me. And I finally started to get help for it. And I'm still in treatment for it now. But like, yeah, the transition out of the military was rough for me because I completely almost went cold turkey with no community around me anymore.
And I think that even with all the transition prep and the things, that's the thing that I still think that they don't even sort of prepare Marines for, how alone you are going to feel in that
Yeah.
process. It's and there's so many things that should be done, could be done, and but the reality is like it is a lonely place. And to
Mhm.
then it everything starts to come unraveled or come to the forefront, or like you were saying, like the mental health. And one of the things that I have just like want to commend you for so much is being willing to share so much of your mental health journey and being so transparent with it. And I guess the question I have is like, why did you feel the need to be so transparent with what you're going through?
I tell people all the time that it's the alone that kills you. And the ugliest days I had when dealing with mental health issues were the days that I felt alone, completely alone, that nobody could understand what I was going through, that nobody has ever experienced what I'm experiencing, that nobody's ever dealt the bad hand that I've been dealing with. And when you're in that dark hole of misery and you can't find a light and you think everything's hopeless and you feel like you're alone, it's terrifying because that's the closest I ever came to not wanting to be here anymore was that alone. And I knew that I wasn't actually alone, right? I knew that I was certainly wasn't the only one who's been dealing with PTSD and depression and everything else. I mean, hell, I got friends of mine that I intimately talked about this subject with, but I just felt like everyone else deserved the help instead of me. And that, I wasn't that bad. I was just alone, you know? And then when things got better for me, after some really ugly and scary moments over the years, when things got better for me, I felt this responsibility to share with people that they're not alone. And I figured even if I just talk about my experiences and my story, someone somewhere is going to hear that and go, "Oh, I've been there," or "I'm there right now. Like I'm experiencing it." I tell people all the time, like I will never say I know what you're going through. I know what you're experiencing. What I will say is I know what it's like to be there. I know what it's like to be in that dark hole. And I can shine a flashlight down there and say, hey, there's a way out. You can get out of this. It's possible. You got to do the work. I can't do it for you, right? I can throw you a rope and I can throw you, flashlight and everything else. I'll give you the tools, but like only you can do the work to heal yourself because you got to want it for yourself. But one thing I will do the rest of my life is share as publicly and as loudly as possible the ugly things that I've experienced because other people are experiencing that as well. And I need them to understand that they're not alone and that progress can happen to anyone. Just like bad things can happen to anyone, so can the good things. Okay. And you deserve to know that those days are coming. And you just got to reach out to the people around you. You just got to accept the fact that you literally can't do this alone. And you don't have to, not at all. Call me. I don't care.
And I think what resonates with me so much is when you said that you felt like, there were people who had been through worse and almost that then you didn't rate it. I just feel like that resonates so much. And then especially for those of us who are in these, who have gone through these traumas that aren't direct combat or I didn't get shot or I didn't do this or like these things that didn't happen. And I don't know if it's a Marine thing. I talk to Marines the most, but like where like I feel like I hear that so often that it's like, well, there's people who have it worse than me. And when you, I think, finally get to that moment where you're able to switch and not compare your trauma and realize like I'm valid to have these feelings, right? I'm valid to have these emotions and that it affected me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I mean, it's certainly a machismo thing, a macho thing. It's certainly a Marine thing. It happens for a lot of different reasons, but there's just that, it's like if we're on the battlefield, I'd rather other people get help first that are hurt worse than me. So we're used to that kind of triage of the worst ones get help first. And there's always that toughness part of it too, where it's like, yeah, it's really not that bad. I can figure this out. And you don't know what you're really going through sometimes until you get past it. But I'm glad I finally had someone, point a finger in my chest and be like, hey, you need it too, and you deserve it too. It's not just for everyone else. You don't have to wait at the back of the line. Okay. Go get help. And I did, thankfully.
And you, in your transition, there's a lot of things that you have found as like other coping mechanisms that are like positive, not coping mechanisms, but like positive, like things to do, sports specifically. Can you tell me about some of those things that you are involved in and that you've kind of used to help with those healing process?
I'm yeah, I mean, I know you're asking about golf.
I
So we're gonna
am.
talk about golf. No, I've always been an athlete and I've always played sports even when I was in the military. I'd go to play basketball during lunch or stuff like that. But I started playing golf a couple of years ago and a buddy of mine got me into it. I'm too old to play competitive football anymore, or not really. I could still do it, but I don't want to do it anymore. But I started playing golf and it turned into like the perfect mental health thing for me because no matter what happens, right? You step up to your ball, you hit a shot, whether it's good or bad, you got to go hit another one until the ball's in the hole, right? Like until you're done, no matter what shot you just hit, you got to go hit another one and another one and another one. And my buddy Andy would always tell me, especially when you're new and you're starting off, you can't hit good shots. It's really hard to play golf. And he would just always tell me the next shot is the best shot. The next shot is the best shot. And what he was really saying to me was that you get another opportunity to do this, to make it right. So you don't, it didn't all rest on that one swing, you get another opportunity at it. And even if you hit the shot of your life just now, if I hit a hole in one, cool, that's awesome. The next hole, I still got to hit again. So you have to flush whatever happened, good or bad. And you have to focus on what's in front of you and you have to execute it. And all of those things collectively together make a ton of sense for me as a mental health practice. And it's really helped me calm myself and focus and find that balance and say, okay, flush whatever just happened. What are you doing next? And then do it.
I never thought one golf would sound so poetic and or so therapeutic. So that is awesome. And I love how like it makes me think of your leadership though, and it's cool to see because I think you were already kind of doing that, but for other people. You weren't doing that for yourself, but you were doing that for other people. And I remember especially like one of my favorite things was like, so at Quantico, we actually trained every Thursday and Friday. I don't remember which day was Marine Day and which day was like MLS, but either way, every Thursday and Friday. And so often you would do these really cool like competitions, like go out and get a photo, go out and get a this, go out and do this,
Yeah.
and just how hands-on you were. Can you tell me a little bit about how your leadership style developed? Because I think that's something that's really important for those Marines who are in, and especially in our AUC field, to take, because you were so good at training us in a way we didn't know we were even really being trained.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I'm a big believer, and I can even tie this back to golf, right? When I started learning how to golf, I didn't spend a lot of time at the driving range. I would just go play because I always believed that just executing the thing you're actually trying to get better at is better practice than just like stagnant practice. Um, and that's something that I definitely did with you guys. I always felt that you're better off in the field with your camera, playing around, experimenting, trying different things out. Just have an objective and chase it instead of listen to me talk about aperture settings and depth of field. I can give you a hip pocket class all day long, but I wanted you guys out and about, away from your desk, because ultimately that's what the job always was being in the field with the Marines, getting dirty and having fun doing the job. And I was lucky that you guys were always receptive to it and didn't really push back on it too much. But to me, it's like, how do you teach people to do things? Well, you have them do it, and then you coach them after the fact, or you coach them during the fact and say, hey, have you thought about this, have you thought about that? But I was never the book teacher. I was a hands-on teacher, and I liked being involved with things. I liked being involved with listening to you guys talk about your shots and help pick your selects. I liked being involved in the process because when you're it's not a micromanaging thing, it's being involved. When you're involved in the process, people value your input. When you're micromanaging, you're just getting in the way.
Yeah, definitely not micromanaging. And I think something that was unique, at least in our field too, combat camera, they would go to all these shoots and there would be like 3 or 4 of them, as where we didn't have the manpower to do that.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, we were the only public affairs at an event. So when we got to do these trainings, it was that we were all together. We were in an area where, like, one specifically, I remember, I don't know why we were at OCS, but like we were doing something at OCS. And I remember, like, standing on the tracks, a shot normally I wouldn't be able to do because I'd be alone and be like, the train's going to kill me. But instead it was like, okay, I can like take this little extra risk to try to get this angle and then show, on the back of the camera, like, oh, this is what I got. And then it was like, oh, great. But then try, XYZ in the moment. And how just for like the type of job in the career field that we had, you need that. You almost like, if you don't have that, then you can still be good at the job, but there's just things that, like, I just do feel like you missed that, like, we really got that opportunity with you that I don't think we would've
Yeah.
otherwise.
And that's something I learned when I first got to Buford, from the Marines that I reported to at the time. Um, Sergeant Lindsay, Corporal Wallace, Corporal Farr. These were three women who had incredibly creative photography skills, and my photography skills at the time were very basic and vanilla. And this is even after two deployments, right? So it was very much just like point and shoot kind of photography. And they were the ones who would take me out on shoots with them, especially Jen Farr. She's like, I wish you had ever met her and worked with her because she is like the flower child of the Marine Corps. Okay. She's a ball of energy and she's 100% like this hippie flower child, outstanding Marine though. And she would climb trees and wiggle herself into like these insane places just to get a decent shot. So I started watching her do that. I'm like, well, everyone's looking at her like she's crazy, but she's coming back with some really dope stuff. So maybe there's something to it. Like, why? I'm clearly not afraid to get dirty. Who cares?
That is that reminded me of the time Duncan climbed on, the top of the building.
Remember that.
Um, and then he said, "Sometimes it's better to ask forgiveness than permission." That was the wise words of Corporal Duncan.
That's my life motto. I always ask forgiveness.
What was what would you say would maybe be like a super positive moment or a moment in the Marine Corps that you were like, "This is, like, why I'm proud to be a Marine," or this is what the Marine Corps means to me, or even a person that you're like, this relationship and this thing, like, this is the epitome of the Marine Corps to me.
Yeah, that's a good one. I have so many.
We have time for a few then.
I will say, as someone who's been out for a long time, I got out in 2013. So it's been, yeah, a decade and some change since I've been out. I've always still been impressed by the impact I've still had on Marines who are still in. Um, Guy named Justin Bowling comes to mind. When he first came to us in Buford, he was a open contract Marine, and all he wanted to do was, lift weights and transfer to EOD or infantry or like he did not want to be a public affairs Marine at all. He's very against the idea. And he was talented. He had the ability. He just didn't buy in. And I remember, kind of putting my foot in his butt quite a few times. And we had a very heart to heart conversation the one time because I was the only combat vet in the office at that time. And I got to tell him a lot of the, you know, more combat parts of the job that I was able to do in my field, and also explain to him that he's still a Marine no matter what. His number might get called in any other way. Like needs of the Marine Corps dictate your MOS no matter what. But yeah, we had several good conversations, and then he kind of me and him didn't really talk for probably like 5 or 6, 7 years. Just as different duty stations. He moved on in life, I moved on in life, and then out of nowhere, one year, I get word that he's bragging to all these other, bigwig folks over in Quantico about the impact that Corporal Zahn had on him back in the day, and I'm just sitting here like, wait, what? I did what? And he's been very profusive and telling me that I changed his career. I changed the impact of his career, and he's still in, and he's still changing minds and changing careers for people. So that's an impact that I'm still very much blown away that I have is that I'm still touching the active duty force, you know, Kevin Bacon style, second and third level, right? 6 degrees of separation, but it's there. Um, there's lots. The first time one of my Marines asked me to pin him, you know, like that responsibility as a NCO and being able to like I mean I had a little tear in my eye because I'm like, man, this means something. Um, so many of my memories, especially like towards like the back end of my career, are so related to like things my Marines did. I'm so proud of the things that my people were able to accomplish. And like, yeah, I did some really cool stuff, but man, I saw some people do even better things, and that to me is the most rewarding part of it all.
And that goes back to like the beginning of this episode and when I was talking about like the Sergeant Zahn I knew and the impact and just like why it is then so important to tell your story because the Marine Corps is so small and our MLS is even smaller. But to like, I just hope after this that more people too will then like, yeah, you had this impact, you did this. And it's just like, it's, I think, cool to see. And most often we don't get to see the impact we've made. And
Yeah,
by telling your story, I think you get to feel that. And then who knows who's going to listen to this and maybe join the Marine Corps, right? Like there's another person that you may have impacted and you may never know. And how
yeah,
powerful that is.
yeah. Well, and it goes both ways too, right? There's people I'm sure who are going to see my name and face pop up and have a dislike for it. It counts the territory, I I I haven't always rubbed people the right way over my lifetime. I'm sure there are people who think I'm still a jerk or still, whatever. And that's okay. That they're making an opinion of me based on their experience of me. So who am I to sit here and say all these years later that they're wrong? I'd love for people to update their opinion of me if they have a negative one, but like I can't concern myself really with someone's opinion of me. I just know by and large, I try to aim to have a positive reaction from people.
And I think that again, it just speaks volumes and says so much to you as a person because it's not like you even said that they were wrong. It was just like their perception, their experience, you know what I mean? And again, that's how you led. That's such a like that's how you led. And so is there anything else we haven't talked about that you would like to talk about that I have not brought up?
How much time do I have?
I didn't time it. I think we have like 10 minutes, 10, 15
Oh,
minutes.
um, I'm I'm at this place now where I would be at 20 years next year, right? And so there's still that thought process of what could have happened if I had stayed in. I could be retired next year. I'd have a whole lot more time for golf. Uh, I could be a Walmart door greeter and just work 10 hours a week and just say hi to Frank. My life could be different, but I'm very glad I got out when I did and I went through the things I did because I get to say, that Chris, the person, I have a more fully formed identity of who I am. And I spent a lot of years not hiding, but kind of like trying to distance myself from the Marine Corps version of me because I didn't want people to think that's all I was just a Marine. And it's never that simple, and you're never going to be just a Marine to anyone. And I'm glad that over the years, I've been able to really blend together both sides of myself in such a better way where, when I tell people I was a Marine now, it's a source of pride and I'm not worried about like what negative perception they might say like ew Marines like ew Air Force it's fine.
Air Force.
I mean, this may have just happened recently like because I was in an Air Force heavy area hanging out with my sister's people and she's Air Force and it was just like yeah fine yeah. But no, I've been really introspective lately over the past, 20 years or so and how the Marine Corps has affected my life and how it's going to continue to affect it going forward, especially on a day like this. We're recording on the Marine Corps birthday. So you start thinking about legacy and this is one conversation that I hope is a part of my legacy because I love sharing these bits of myself with the world even if some people think I'm just like this blowhard, whatever, someone I hope listens to this and it triggers something in them to either get the help that they need or to just be a better person to the people around them or whatever. Because the only thing that really matters in life is the people, like the impact I have on people is going to be remembered so long after I'm gone. And then eventually it won't be. But like, I'd rather have that memory of me stick around forever than my name on a building somewhere.
And one of the main reasons why I started this podcast was because of you and your feedback and we had a conversation where it was like, I honestly don't care if nobody listens. I want people to listen, right? But I was like, but I've with this been able to digitize and keep a piece of these marine stories that have had such an impact on my life so that their grandkids can hear it. Their great grandkids can hear it. Their voice and, a piece of their story is literally there forever.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough for, again, we had these conversations before I ever started the podcast, and you were like, I know why you want to do this. And I was like, you do? Because I'm not sure I do. And you were literally like, yes, this is why. And I just can't thank you enough. And I'm so grateful that you're willing to share a piece of your story. And as you know, you're going to be on this podcast more than once because I'm going to make you be on it more than once.
I hope to be on it as much as you'll let me. No, I mean, I think it goes back to something that I told you guys very early on in your career. Tell the Marine Corps story. The Marines deserve to have their story told. It doesn't have to be, the new American novel or, this great piece of writing, but it's something that someone can point to and say, hey, mom, look, I'm in the paper. Or, share with their family a YouTube video of themselves. But like, everyone joins for a reason. Everyone has different experiences in their career. Some people have some really negative experiences in the Marine Corps. And I think those stories are important to tell as well. We can think of someone that we mutually served with who had a very negative experience. And, I hope that at some point she tells that story because it deserves to be told. It's ugly, but it's a problem that needs to be fixed. And I thank you for giving us a venue to talk about these things because I want to be able to pull up this episode in 5 years and listen to what I was saying. And hey, maybe I'll think I was a total idiot for what I said back then, right? But who knows?
With that, I'm going to ask the last question of the episode, which is if you had to take the oath again, would you?
Never. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't imagine my life without the Marine Corps. It's been so instrumental to me, and not even just for the things that I did in uniform, but the people that I met through my time in the service, and the people that I still have, a phone full of text messages right now from people saying happy birthday, Marine. Like that stuff matters to me because the people that I've met in my lifetime through the Marine Corps are some of the most incredible people and the deepest friends, and the love and connection that like it's hard to describe, and I'm so grateful for it.
This is the Oath We Took podcast, and you just heard a piece of Chris's story. You now know one more Marine and one more piece of Marine Corps history. His sacrifices matter. His service matters. His stories matter. Not every Marine story is the same. We didn't all join the military for the same reason. What is the same is the oath that we all took. An oath that easily could have ended in death, and for some, it did. So listeners, instead of asking you to thank a Marine for their service, I'm going to challenge you to continue to listen to their stories instead.